Let's do that. Thank you. Good morning, Slaters. How y'all doing today? Tired, I heard that, right? Can you all hear me okay? My voice is a little still shaken from the boy band reunion the other night. So, anyway. Well, good morning. Good to see you all. I'm kind of excited. I think this is what Alexander feels like, right, when he's on stage. Although I wish I could have one of those Kentucky mules. Maybe not. That's okay. Sorry. Well, my name is Drew Griffin. I'm the Director of Admissions Operations and Technology at Rockhurst University. So glad to see you all today. Thank you for being here. We have an exciting day for you. Rules, right? I'm so glad everyone came out for a discussion on rules. We have a lot to pack in, so for the next 3.5 hours, we are going to blow your mind as we talk about the exciting world of rules, right? So just a little bit about me. I've been 3 years at Rockhurst. Prior to that, I've been 24 years in higher education, mainly on the recruitment side, but I've been with Slate and different instances for like 10 years. So very excited about that. In terms of Rockhurst, just a little bit about us. We have a total enrollment of just over 3,000 students. That's undergraduate and graduate. We are one of 27 Jesuit institutions in the nation. Any Jesuits in here? Yes. Don't talk about. Thank you. We have an annual application volume of roughly 5,000. Now, I know that's not overwhelming, but it's definitely enough to keep us busy, and it's definitely enough to make sure that our rules are running properly. So we're going to get into that here in a second. We've been with Slate since 2018. And we have two instances. We have an advancement instance, and we have an admissions instance. I'm a Slate captain, but we have Jennifer as well, who oversees all enrollment communications and does some events and forums and all the things as well. So with two folks, as you can imagine, we have limited capacity, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. So glad that Carnegie has partnered with us, and I want to let them introduce themselves now.
Hi everyone, my name is Lifshey, and I'm a Senior Enrollment and Analytics Specialist at Carnegie. I've been with Carnegie for over 4 years. Time flies when you're having fun. And essentially within Carnegie, we have so many different services, communications, engaged behavior scoring, you name it, we've got it. It's so fun. It's super fun to work there too. I feel like it's a party every day. We get to work with Drew, and we really look forward to all of our calls and everything. And I'm going to turn it over to Darian.
Hi guys, my name is Darian Quinn. I am a Slate Communications strategist with Carnegie. I've been with Carnegie for a little over a year now, but I've been Slate for 3 years. I am a geek for Slate. I really, it's what I do in my free time. It's also almost full class. It's a lot of fun. So I came on to working with Drew at Rockhurst about a year ago. We came into their instance to help them kind of get up to speed with best practices, move on to configurable joins, and really improve efficiency. Our number one goal is improving efficiency for their system. So we're going to turn it over, and Nina's going to talk a little bit about background on rules, just for some context before we get started.
So if you know anything about me, I am such a rule follower. I don't like the gray area, very much black and white. So this literally is my jam, and I absolutely geek out when I talk about it. So diving in, right? So rules, what are they? They literally power your entire instance, whether you know it or you don't, right? And they're so simple to set up, but they're also simple to get a little dirty, and then things kind of snowball, and before you know, it could be a big problem. But really what they do, they touch everything. There's tentacles everywhere with rules. They update records and statuses. So as you're, buying names and you're putting those into your instance, you don't need to have static mappings here and there. You've set up those rules to be able to bring those students in, they hit the rules, and they're either a prospect or an inquiry or what have you, right? Other things are added. They trigger communications, they move workflows forward. So as you're reviewing, let's say, oh my goodness, you have, 20,000 applications you have to read in a cycle. You're not sitting there in your workflow manually moving these to the next read, right? So that does that for you. They populate queries and populations specifically for drip campaigns. So love those set them and forget them. They do that. They also drive, portals and reports, deliver, and integrations, you name it, they touch it, right? So essentially, everybody has a Slate instance, right? And whether you set yours up back in, 2012 or just this year, you set up rules, right? There's got to be at least, so many instances have so many rules, and some, not so many, and that's okay too, right? But I'm sure at least somebody in this room has a legacy rule that was created that nobody remembers who created it or what it does, right? I'm sure that there are rules that are, duplicate or conflicting logic, and they're fighting each other, right? I'm sure at least somebody in this room set up a temporary rule to fix something, but they forgot it, and now it's gone on for 4 or 5 years, and you forgot what that temporary fix was, and you're just not touching it, right? Or it's just running, but it's not doing anything, and that could be slowing things down. You might have that one rule that's silently holding an entire process together. And I'm sure the rule is, of course, called Rule Be Too New, right? I don't know, but I've seen it. And of course, if you set up your rules and your instance came into fruition before configurable joins and bandwidth is tight, those rules are most likely in that local base, right?
Yep.
So, exactly. And then somebody who thinks they know ends up editing or disabling a rule and things go awry, right? That's happened. And I did that once, not pretty, at a former institution. Yeah, I learned the hard way. So, yes, that is ultimately, what rules do. Rules can break. And when they break, they will break your processes, right? There's 3 main avenues we like to talk about, operational impacts that rules can have, right? So the first is performance and rendering. So if your rules are erroring out or they're slow, they're going to slow down your instance. And that can touch queries. So your queries will run slower, or they'll time out, which is super frustrating, especially when you have a VP asking, how many, I need a list of these many deposits in 2 minutes, right? And that's not happening. Reports, they will time out, or they'll just fail to load, and you get that dreaded yellow bar that just, right? You know it. And you're sitting there, oh, please, God, run, right? Portals become sluggish. So, if you have things tied to the portal and a student goes to register for an event and something doesn't load, oh my gosh, the amount of phone calls you probably get, right? And then if you use materialized view queries, or SFTPs, sending that data, like export import loop, right? That dreaded 900-second timeout. That is the worst. And when that happens and then it trickles like a snowball down a mountain, it just slows absolutely everything down. It's awful. Within communications, drip campaigns may missend windows. So that query takes so long to render. And let's say you only have one of those windows selected, a time frame, that query doesn't render, that email doesn't go out, and then those students are communicated with, right? That's awful. As I said, emails fail to trigger, and then population, they update too slowly for timing. And you would have had somebody who had already applied, and they're still getting messages, hey, apply now. And then you get that phone call, and it's super uncomfortable. And, hey, did you get my application? What's the deal? With regards to data and workflow, as I mentioned, people fail to either add into a population or are removed because, that rule just times out and no bueno. Applications get stuck in workflow bins. This is the number one thing that drives me bananas, right? The rules with workflow bins and how you think that they are set up correctly and boom, they're popped back into the wrong bin, right? We've been there, have we not?
Yes.
The bane of Drew's existence.
The bane of Drew's existence.
I've lost my religion many times.
And, incorrect statuses or updates will occur if the rules break. Reporting, funnel counts, they become inaccurate. And then we lose the credibility across campus. It's awful. Drew, take it over.
All right. So, yeah, errors and more errors. And you'll see on the screen here just flashes of the nightmare that I live daily with the errors that we're seeing in our instance. I'm going to get real. I'm going to get personal with you guys for a second, okay? This is the tree of trust. We can be honest with each other, all right? Show of hands, how many of you have spent time updating records only to have a rule just come back and revert everything you did? Anyone? Yes? Oh, thank God. I thought it was
Yes.
Okay, yes. It's tough, right? And you've lost your religion doing that too. It's like, yeah, it ruins your evening. I found out as I work with rules that it's a thankless process, right? No one ever comes to me and says, hey, Drew, thanks for that great rule you made. I always hear about it when it breaks and it goes wrong, and that's when I cry. That's when I shut my door, I turn on some Adele, open my box of wine, and just update the rule logic. And that's my night right there. So no fun there. But seriously, in our instance, we had over 1,000 rules. I don't know if there was like an award for that, but it was pretty gnarly. But over 1,000 rules in our instance, and they were broken. They would take minutes to run or just air out all completely. They were contradicting each other. I've got a fun note about that here in a second. But just the rules were just broken, causing frustration for me, my team, the campus.
With Alexander's comment yesterday about the rule count and how many rules, that was Rockhurst.
It was like 138,000 new rules this year. That was pretty much me. So you're welcome.
That overhaul they took out a good percentage of that.
But the worst case, though, was we were not CJ compliant, right? Because the people before us built it, and it was great at the time, but we've had turnover, and then things changed, and more rules were added, and they're just piling on top of each other, and we just did not have the time to get it fixed. So, how do we correct these errors? What was the solution to correcting these errors? Well, I'm glad you asked. It was Carnegie. That's it, guys. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
See you later.
It was Carnegie. As I mentioned before, we're a small shop. Me and my coworkers, we didn't have the time or capacity to do a heavy lift of overhauling our rules, right? It takes months to audit and go through and clean up everything and then test it in the testing environments and go that route. So glad to have Carnegie as our partner to help us with that heavy load. The first thing we did was a rules audit. And if you've not done a rules audit yet, get ready to live, right? Because it's a good time. But a rules audit is necessary just to unpack what's in there, what is broken, what is it just needs to be scrapped altogether, right? So that's the first step. And Darian's going to talk about the rules audit in the next slide. Another thing was just the enhanced rule structure. We had rules everywhere, and it was just a hot mess with just the naming conventions and no folders. You may know what I'm talking about too, but that was another thing, was just getting the naming conventions right, getting them all in folders. Oh my gosh, exclusivity groups. Let me give a hand for that one. I didn't even know how cool they were until working with Darian and Nina on this. And then at the time, we didn't touch the bin rules yet, because another project that Carnegie was helping us with was the workflows and the updated workflow. And now here, this week, that's going to be a lot easier for that. So thanks, Alexander. But now since we've actually produced these slides, we've been diving into the workflow and updating those bin movement rules and things like that. So we're definitely making a lot of major changes there. Very excited about that. But Darian, if you could chat with us about the rules audit.
Absolutely, I can. The rules audit is probably the most daunting part. You have no idea what's running in your instance. You probably have rules and folders you don't know about. You just don't really know where to start, because just where you start. Well, at risk of sounding like Billy Mays in a as seen on TV infomercial, I have a solution for you. So we started off with exporting all of our rules from our instance with a nifty little query that was found in the knowledge base. We made a couple quick edits to it to add in some links. It is in the suitcase we will share with you guys later. So we got everything exported, and this query told us which rules had or statements in it, which rules had nots in it, which rules were using formulas, which rules were using SQL. So it gave us a really good picture of where we needed to start and what was going to be the bigger problems. So we got those exported out of our instance, and then we had to organize them. So I took that spreadsheet that we pulled out, I added a couple columns to do some prioritization, to leave room for notes, to mark where erroring, and on that note, we checked errors. We ran check errors twice. I ran them once during a peak time while everybody was in the instance doing things. And I ran them once in the evening to kind of watch what was erroring really consistently and what was erroring when the system was a little overloaded. As I'm checking those errors, you can kind of see it in the GIF that I'm marking on that far right column which rules were erroring and which ones were flagging yellow with a warning. So I had a good idea of where to start. What was urgent? Like what needs to happen right now? And that was where I got into prioritizing. So that far left column over here, actually it might be your right. Either way. I had a review priority. So urgent, I need to review it yesterday, and we need to start on updating it yesterday. And then high, low, or we don't need to look at this, we already know it's okay. So it kind of gave me a spot to start where you're feeling so overwhelmed, there's so much to do. Let's put it in order, and it's easier to take apart bite-sized pieces. So once I got through and prioritized what needs to be looked at, I then went through and I opened every single rule in that. I looked at every rule, I checked the logic on every rule, and I was able to, again, prioritize. Okay, so maybe this one looked like it was one because it had a formula in it that I felt we were going to have to update right away. It's actually running as efficient as it possibly can be right now, and we can come back to this later. So my update priority may have been different than my review priority. That's why I had two separate columns there. And then while I'm going through and reviewing, and I have all these rules open, you're never going to remember what you actually looked at. My biggest tip for you is notate. Take notes as you have it open of what's broken, what you want to change, and what your plan is. Keep them brief, but get them in your spreadsheet. You'll thank yourself for it later. So what did we discover while we were going through this audit? We discovered a whole bunch of rules that had entry term in them, and some of the entry terms were still in 2022. There was no point in those rules still running and still existing. They could go away, but that really led to, these rules are really easy to miss and not realize they need to be updated. So we need to come up with a solution for updating entry term without having to open every rule. Exclusivity groups that did exist had overlapping priorities. We had one exclusivity group with 8 rules at number 1. There is no point to your exclusivity group if you have 8 rules as a number 1 priority. And then on top of that, there were many exclusivity groups used. I think there were 3. 3 total.
That's something, yeah.
I won't call you out directly, but I'm not shaming you, Drew. This is not a group shame session today. But there were only about 3 exclusivity groups used. So that meant that every rule was running every time and it was bogging down faster, I guess slower and slower, but bogging down more and more. And a lot of rules were still in the local base. We hadn't done a full conversion over to the local base. That part of the project was getting everything into CJ. And those rules that had started going into CJ had a lot of our one-to-many joins that were outside of subqueries, so they weren't getting accurate results either. Drew can go a little deeper into it.
So yeah, we had contradicting rules that were hidden in different folders. I kid you not, I know we already produced the slides before this, but after the fact, I found a student who had competing rules for about 5 hours. Every 20 minutes, it would be like, step aside, so-and-so, unset, step aside, set, step aside, whatever. And it was, I was going to lose my mind. A lot of the rules used not in. So again, they were local based, not in, but didn't use the not exists for the subqueries. So that was a big one. Or they had a lot of ors or nots. One rule had like 4 ors in there.
I think it was more than 4.
More than 4.
I'm pretty sure it was more than 4.
If you're keeping score at home, that's bad. So yeah, so that's not good. The rules were airing out ruggedly, or they were taking a long time to run. Folding structures were just a mess. And those old rules were left in previous status. Who here has previous status rules open? Be honest. All right, a few of you.
Yeah.
Some of you are too embarrassed to raise your hand. Yeah, so don't have those previous status or inactive status rules open. So keep in mind.
So before we got started on changing things and overhauling, I'm a very visual person. And I wanted to have an idea of what folders we're going to look at. We don't think about folders and rules as often as we think about them in deliver or events or forms. We're not reporting on them. It still matters. It's going to make it a whole lot easier to find the rules you need to update and the rules you need to add if you put together a good organizational structure. So I laid it out before I started. I threw together a flowchart. I'm a big fan of flowchart and spreadsheets. In case you didn't figure that one out, it's part of my little geek work. It's fine. So I set up folders. Every exclusivity group had its own folder or subfolder, and then any rules that were related to each other or doing very similar processes got its own folder or subfolder as needed. And as we went into this foldering, we also set up a naming convention. Every single rule, started with CJ because we still have some local rules we were moving over. It said what the rule was doing, and it said what type of population it was affecting. So without even opening it, you knew what was happening inside that rule and what to go look for when you had to do updates. So Drew can talk about that.
Just a quick example of our revised, updated rule structure there. You'll see all the rules have CJ hyphen. So everything new that we made, that's configurable joins, now has the CJ hyphen, blah, blah, blah. On the far right, you'll see the exclusivity group, but also the priority numbers. And you'll notice they're in like 5, 10 increments. And that's so that we can add in other things. And we've already done that. We've already added in another rule in there somewhere that we had to do. But they're also in the same folder, which is nice. We can find everything in a nice, neat package there.
And one little note to add to that is being flexible. So when you're laying out that whole plan for foldering, you might get going and say, okay, this might actually work better in a different way. You don't have to hold yourself to the original plan. And the same kind of thing goes with numbering our exclusivity groups. I go in increments of 5 so that I can slide in new rules without having to renumber the whole list. So you'll see in that first 3 rules, we have a number 4 in there. That was made after the exclusivity group was set up. I didn't want to renumber the whole thing. It slides in right between 1 and 5. So Nina's going to talk a little more about exclusivity groups.
Yes, exclusivity groups. This keeps things so nice and clean, and really there's just so many benefits. I don't even know one con about this, right? So it essentially stops unnecessary rule processing. So that do nothing rule at the very top, it will exclude anybody who doesn't meet the criteria to be able to fall in. So people don't need to go through every single rule in your instance. And on top of that, if you have a lot of people in your instance and updates are being made, those hundreds of thousands of records are going to be hitting, unless you're in that exclusivity group and that do nothing rule, they'll kick them right out, and then it speeds things really up. Improves overall system performance, so it doesn't bog things down because rules are constantly refreshing in the instance over and over, second by second, right? The more that this, exclusivity group is working, it is literally taking down the bogging and the taxation of your instance, and it's speeding things up. It prevents conflicting automation, so that awful thing that poor Drew had to experience with, the unset, set, unset, and set. That does not happen, right, in that exclusivity group. You just need to make sure that you don't duplicate exclusivity group rules, because then it will, right? Reduces the risk of delays and timeouts. So those students, the ones who meet the criteria that are falling through the trickle effect, they are the ones, it keeps it speedy and keeps it tidy. And then it creates a cleaner and easier to manage logic, right? So with cycle prep, or you have to review or add something new, and new processes just come onto your desk and you need to set this up, you can go back in, you can see, oh, I actually have this set up, I just have to add one more rule to it. Or there's nothing there, so I have to create new.
So while we're talking about making things efficient and evergreen, we're also talking about making things more efficient for your team. How often do you have to go in and make updates? How often do you have to check your logic is running right? So in that effort, we want to make our rules as evergreen as we can. And there's a few key points that you can do that. The first is to be small and direct with your rules. You want to have as few filters as possible in your rule. And you want each rule to have one clear purpose. So don't have 5 or statements trying to target 5 different populations all in one rule. When you're in doubt, break it out. Have an exclusivity group with 5 small rules instead of one big rule. And then you can put those do nothings that Nina just talked about at the top. So you can pull out all of those redundant filters. So if you have a filter for student type of freshman that would run through all 5, you can pull that out and put it as a do nothing of, if they're not a freshman, just skip them. Don't run them through. Or if you want only your current term to run through that exclusivity group, Drew has a really cool trick he's going to show you on our next slide of setting categories on your entry terms. So you only have to update the entry term in one spot and it pushes out everywhere else. So small and direct. Keep your rules small, give them a clear purpose. You want to filter in the affirmative. To ask Slate for what is true. Don't tell it you want what is not true. So use your in lists. An example of this would be filtering, if you're currently filtering for status is not incomplete, switch that and go status is complete. Tell it what you want. It's going to take a lot less time to run. Another example here is schools in lists. Instead of doing a character search for schools in lists, filter in your geo markets. It's going to run a lot faster. It doesn't have to run through and look for all those individual sets of characters. You want your rules to be independent. We've all probably heard about daisy chaining and tying one rule to another. That's something you want to stay away from. It's a little risky. Rule A, depending on Rule B, or Rule B, depending on Rule A, isn't always going to work because the rules aren't always going to fire in the same order. They're not always going to fire at the same time. So you try and keep your rules independent from each other. Don't make a rule depend on another rule, with very few exceptions. And then you want to keep your fields stable. Try to use fields that are going to stay consistent. Stay away from those fields and bases that are going to grow rapidly. I'm talking message mailing bases, ping bases. Please don't use ping in your rules. Please. It just grows so big and it's so inconsistent. And message mailing is another one that the more and more messages you have going out of your instance, the bigger it's going to get. So try and use those fields that are going to stay stable, like student type or term or a checklist item. Things that aren't going to change frequently. And then you want to make rules that are testable. So every so often, even if it's a rule that's been there for a while, run a check logic on it. Make sure it's still doing what you think it's doing. Run it through preview actions and make sure all of your rules and your exclusivity groups are running and doing what you think they're doing. And then check your errors every so often and make sure something that's always run fine, maybe that not in has expanded and you've added 7 more programs and it's not running the way that you thought it was. Is that not in grew? So just some ideas on keeping it evergreen, saving you from updating things and keeping your system running a little faster. So Drew's going to talk about that category.
Thank you. Sorry. I get choked up apparently talking about rules. Sorry. So, yes, many of you have already done this, so you're familiar with category terms or categories in the prompt. But one thing we found out that seriously, all of our rules had a term filter in there, and it was ridiculous. It was redundant. It was embarrassing, to be honest with you. And so every time we had cycle prep, I would have to go into every rule or try to think through every rule that had a term in it, and then update that. That was ridiculous. So the category prompt allows us to, on the term, and you'll see on the screen there, go into future term, previous term, current term, whatever. And again, you may be doing this already, and that's awesome. But yeah, now we just go through and on the entry term prompt, update that one little thing of current term, previous term, whatever, and that does it for us. And all the rules that use terms and no longer have to go in and actually update each specific term. So that's a free tip. You're welcome. But hopefully that helps you out if you've not done that already.
We also have another fun little query in the suitcase where you can go and find all of your rules that are in the term right now so you can update it to that. So some common mistakes that we see a lot, and this is pretty much a review of what we've already talked about, is you don't want to be building in logo anymore. The time has come, my friends. It's time to move to configurable drawings. I know.
Don't use the bridge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Alexander's going to come is. So it's time to move out of building in local. Another common mistake I see a lot is using not in when you're building. You're going to get much more accurate results and much faster results if you're using a subquery with not exists. It keeps you filtering in the positive within that subquery, but you're still excluding.
And then that same thing, you have this balancing act of avoiding filtering in the negative altogether wherever you can. Filter in that affirmative, it's going to go faster. And avoid long lists of prompts. I think I just told you 3 things that probably contradict each other. So you have to find that very careful balancing act of what's going to run fastest and still be accurate and effective. But choose your options for your fields, prompts, filters that are going to minimize the long list of prompt names.
Custom formulas in SQL. I learned SQL this year. It's super fun. It makes things a little bit easier, right? But you really want to avoid that. Slate gives you those filters, those tools to be able to use it. And it's set up that way so that it runs efficiently. Now, of course, if there's, something that isn't available, either, on the table or whatnot, and you want to, you can, just be very careful about that, right? Because it will be more taxing on that rule and it will slow things down. Rules left in preview status. Drew mentioned that. Just activate it or delete it, right? Preview still runs. It may not be executing or doing all the things, but it's still running in the background. So if that preview rule that you move to preview to work on later that, was erroring out, it's still going to slow down your instance. Using comparisons unnecessarily, right? So the comparison you want to be weary of. Keep it clean, keep it simple with your filters. And again, using OR to address multiple populations. So break them out into small rules. We have a fun little thing at Carnegie.
Say it loud.
Right? Loud and proud. When in doubt, break it out. Okay?
Let's all try that. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, let's guys. When in doubt, break it out.
So quick question, because I heard you say, how many people didn't realize that preview actions are still running, or preview status is still running when you run your rules? That's about my thought, because I didn't know that for a long time either.
It is.
They're just sitting there silently running your instance slower and slower.
Yeah.
Sorry, ran too fast.
All right, so last thing in terms of for the practical use, some tips and tricks that you learn. One, just check those rules. If you're a Slate captain or just if it's in your role, to just kind of check those rules. Do it bi-weekly, monthly, whatever is convenient for you. Set up a Slate task or maybe put it on your calendar as a reminder. Just check those. Check that rules health every so often just to make sure that there's nothing awkward, misfiring in your system, especially as you update. Again, delete rules that are not in use, right? Those inactive or preview status rules. If you're not using them, just get them out of there. Get it out of your instance. Your instance will thank you for it, right? It'll run a lot smoother and cleaner. Utilize CJ naming prefixes in all new rules. One of the cool things about this is that easily you can tell what are old rules and what are new rules because CJ hyphen are all the new. Everything else is old, and that was easy to make those changes then as we were updating. Reevaluating, reassessing your rule groups. That's definitely necessary, especially if you're adding more populations. Or new programs or things, you'll have to reassess, reevaluate to make sure that it's all firing correctly. And then lastly, this is a really cool idea that Darian had, is just turning on and off the rules in chunks. That way, then if something airs out, you don't have the whole list that you have to kind of look through it and filter through. But I knew as I was doing this, I turned off maybe merit scholarship rules this day, and I turned off the old ones. And then I checked the next day. And then turn on advisor assignments this day, and then anyway, it was a lot smoother and easier to do it that way than just turning everything off and on. So
you're inevitably going to find a rule that doesn't run the way you thought it was when you turn it all over. So when you're turning it on and off in chunks, it's easier to locate where something might have gone a little awry than trying to track it back to the 150 rules you turned on yesterday. Keep it smaller. And one more little piece on reevaluating and reassessing your rule groups. You also, every so often, want to look at those rules, especially ones might be on rapidly growing bases, and say, is this rule still efficient? Is it still filtering the best way it can? Am I still using the best fields to filter on? And do I even need this rule still? Because there are rules that we only need for a little while, and then it's time to move on from them. So we've had the suitcase in a couple spots. I'm just going to give you guys a little preview of what's in that suitcase. We've really got some resources for you guys. So we have 2 queries in there. One is the rule audit query that I talked about, which started from a knowledge-based article query. I added a couple extra exports in with links and that kind of thing to make it a little easier to go find the rules later. And there's also a link to that spreadsheet that I was using in there. So you can do your export and copy it right into a copy of that spreadsheet and get rolling on your prioritization. You don't have to go build your own spreadsheet. And then there's a second fun little query in there that is a rule lookup by field ID or keyword. So you don't even have to open it other than to update to your instance. Do that once. And then it has a box right on the front, and you can type in your keyword or your field ID, and it's going to spit out to you every rule that's using those fields. Makes it a lot faster to go, update those on preprints to the category version, so you don't have to go do it yet. And then in the description of those queries, there's also some instructions on using them and some helpful resources in the knowledge base, so some extra links in there. I think we can open the floor for any questions you guys may have.
Thank you so much, guys. Questions? We have mic stand in the public room, so any questions, please just line the mic and make it down.
And you guys don't have questions because we've been thinking nonstop every day straight. I also don't play him.
That's fair.
Yep. Right side.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I am admittedly the worst rule writer. In fact, my boss is kind of putting me on freeze. If she even gets a whiff of me in there, it's okay. Anyway, our merit rules are ridiculous. I created them, and they've got like 6 or 7 floors in them. But it's because they can have this GPA with this test score, this rigor score, or this test score, or they can have this GPA with this thing. So how would you suggest, and that's like every level of scholarship, so how would you suggest breaking those rules down so that I can get rid of these?
I can take that. I did this recently with another partner, and great question, by the way. It really depends on your instance. So we don't want to say, and I don't want to put this in your heads that ORs are the devil, right? Like, if they run and they run efficiently, set it up first, right? And I would say throw that entire thing into an exclusivity group, right? But make sure that, you can preview and see, and if it happens to be, a yellow or a red, you can break that piece out with the exclusivity group with, the right next to one another, and then go one layer after that with your other or exactly.
And with Rockhurst's situation, it was similar to that, and we had a couple of different sets of scholarships also. And I did, I believe, 3 exclusivity groups, and I just did them under one main filter. So it was easier to find pieces.
Hi, Kristen Allen from University of South Carolina. I have a question about staff assignments. Exclusivity groups, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Has anyone ever thought about using translation codes for those?
That's the old way we did it.
Okay.
Translation codes. I'm not happy with that necessarily, but that's what we've been using. All their territories, their counties, whatever, are in those translation codes, and it's just an easy assign there. But definitely looking at exclusivity groups. We've had some turnover in our office, so as we have new folks, I think that's the way we're going to go with it.
So that was the better option for you instead of...
I also had a great idea from a friend yesterday that was talking about her staff assignments, and she built it out by territory. It took several territories to work with, so we made very small rules in a large exclusivity group, so it was really easy to change them over as territories changed. So naming for the territory, maybe for the person.
Good point. Thank you.
Good question.
Thank you.
And we'll go to the far side of the room.
Hey, thank y'all so much. Great presentation. Cassidy Crowley from Mercer University. What's your recommendation if a rule was erroring and then it's as simplified as it can possibly be? For example, high school grad year is 2027 and we want that to be the junior population. Why would error? And I mean, you can't simplify it in building that.
Do you have a joint in it by any chance? Is it joint?
No, it's a person base and like 2 filters.
So, I actually met with somebody yesterday where, their rule kept airing out. The only thing was in this source format at this entry term, right? What we ended up doing was we put an additional filter on that to limit it to, because he only wanted it for this cycle. So we said for any of the source records that have come in, I think it was July 1st, 2015 to today, and that set it right up and we had no issue. So maybe take a look and see if, you know, you can kind of filter a little bit more on that. If it's just an entry term, like you had mentioned, if it's where they're coming through in a source format, you might want to take that out of the rule then and apply it to source formats and other things, because there might be a big, large population of students hitting that meet that criteria. Another thing could just be like, if it's that standalone rule, an exclusivity group just for the 2. So it do nothing. If they don't meet this criteria, take them out, and then they can hit that simple rule. So that's another option as well. Great, thank you. Yep, thank you.
We're gonna swing back around to the right side.
Yeah, and I was trying to follow what you're saying there. So, and sometimes I run into a situation where we have multiple different applications that are completely different applications. So an undergrad application might have a series of rules that need to run, and they need to run in a non-exclusivity group. But then I have a writing placement exam that none of those rules need to run. But I need like these 5 rules to run, so I need something like inclusivity because I don't care as a writing placement. Those don't need to run these particular source format checks or whatever. But the regular application does. It could just be going back to how I build out the application, the evaluating, which is off my mouth how to do. But just a general comment on I need something the opposite of inclusivity.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you just want to create just your rules and they don't live in an exclusivity group, that's okay, right? So if it's just, and you're breaking down the process and, okay, do this with this field, do this with this field, that's okay. They don't have to live in an exclusivity group and they can be this exclusive, or that's not a real word, but I'm going to run with it. So, but yeah, you can absolutely do that and they'll run, right? You just want to make sure that your filters and, you know,
Boiled down to exclusivity groups aren't the end all be all, but they definitely speed it up in the right situation. But you kind of have to think on a case-by-case basis.
Exactly. Thank you.
We're gonna go back to the middle.
Hi, Jeannie from Mackillop University. It was pretty ironic when they were talking about how many rules we have, but then we're adding workflows. And every workflow has their own set of rules. I created an administrative workflow, which has a lot of things in it. And I have a couple of situations where the rules follow through, but there's like these certain little nuances of situations where it might not kind of flow. Like if exclusivity groups within workflows, does that even make any sense?
Yeah, so we've been rebuilding all of Rockhurst workflows, and just about every set of rules is an exclusivity group. We wanted to make sure that people weren't bouncing between bins, but that's a really consistent problem for them. They'll get somewhere and then bounce back 3 bins. And the exclusivity group helps prevent that. But I'm gathering you kind of want rules outside of the exclusivity group more.
Like they're all within the workshop has its own exclusivity group, obviously, but there's just a couple instances within that where it's just a weird one-off where people just kind of don't like have to stay here, but they don't follow the normal rules. That I'm struggling with that. Like
That's a tricky one.
Yeah.
Would you have a minute to stick around at the end?
Yeah.
I'd like to pick your brain a little more.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
We're gonna go to that far side, and then we're gonna come back over here to this.
Quick question. So I inherited the Slate database and they have a lot of things on populate. So So as I start going through those and put them in folders, does moving them in folders affect the functionality of the rule?
Not at all. It's
It's
just keep them
organization.
together. Exactly, organization.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah, thank you.